Welcome, everybody, to Fielding the 68, the Field of 68's bracket show. I'm Kai McKeon, your host for the evening on a lovely Friday, guys. And boy, we've already started March, man, because I just watched the USC Upstate Gardner-Webb finale. USC Upstate, a steal, a fadeaway three off the backboard to win the game. March is here, fantastic. Big South tournament, who knows? It's anybody's game. Joining me today is Lukas, Harkins, and Rocco Miller, two of the best bracketologists in the entire land. Fellas, how we doing today? Rocco, how you doing? Looking great as always.
Hey, man. Kai, I'm doing fantastic. That was phenomenal. I had it on this little screen over here. I'm glad you started yelling right when you joined us today. It's going to be an awesome show. Good to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, start us off right. Lukas, how you doing?
Doing well. It's that time of year, isn't it? We're officially in March. We're closing in what I think is the biggest weekend of the year. I can't wait for it.
Indeed. Well, let's start off with this past week, Lukas. Let's talk about bubble outcomes, some losers, some winners. Who do you think stood out the most from this past week and be a negative or a positive based on this week's results?
Yeah, it's tough. If you want to look at teams that were already in the field, I think West Virginia did itself a lot of favors. Winning at Iowa State. Iowa State's obviously been sliding recently, but that's a really big one for West Virginia. Boise State won at home against San Diego State. That's another big one. That keeps Boise State also in the top 30 of the net, which will help out who they face next, which is Utah State, who dominated at UNLV, pushed themselves into top 22 in the net. They get Boise State at home for their chance at a quad one win. Penn State kept itself on the bubble, won at Northwestern. And the ever so sneaky bubble team that is Villanova won at Seton Hall to keep itself in that must win at UConn and then play well at MSG situation.
Villanova, man, they're creeping around. They're still in the conversation, maybe just a little bit, maybe not. Rocco, what'd you see?
Gotta win tomorrow.
What'd you see from this past week?
Hey, I'm proud to say I picked Villanova preseason to win the Big East tournament and not be in the at-large field. And man, that could actually come through in about 9 days. So we'll see. But no, overall, I thought Boise State, just from this past Monday, probably made the biggest move because they were pretty close to first four territory to Dayton, if not right above there. That win over San Diego State, albeit a home game, really kind of solidified them with a third win against the field, beating the top team in the class of the conference in the Aztecs. And I think when you're just comparing the rest of the bubble, it makes Boise State pretty clearly in now. So I think that was just a really important piece for their particular resume. I would also say on the downside, Rutgers is in a really interesting spot because they lose that Minnesota game. That's their fourth loss in the third quadrant, which is kind of starts to stand out. I don't like to focus on the quadrants all that much, but it's 4 losses that are that are out pretty outside of the tournament level field. And when the committee starts looking at these teams closer and closer like this, they're a different team without Meg. And so that's good, that as they creep closer and closer down to the cut line, that could be enough, especially if they lose. They'll play Northwestern this weekend. We'll probably talk about that game. If they lose again, and it's going to be, Rutgers might have work to do next week.
So when you say you don't like to look at the quads too much, what do you mean by that?
I like to look at the teams. I want to know who you played, where you played them, and how you did. Because the quads aren't the end all be all. Like if Ohio State's a quad one win, what are we doing? So I think when you look at, we'll talk about one season in a second. Kansas has won at Kentucky and at TCU. Those are their best road wins. We can talk about 14 quad one wins or 18 quad one wins. It doesn't do much for me. I want to know who you beat and why and where. So even though Kansas had a million opportunities, Virginia is higher on the board than both TCU and Kentucky. So technically, the committee has a point where Virginia being a stronger road win than anything Kansas has. Just a small little example for you, Kai. But I try to look at every team like that. You want to be able to come to a committee meeting and tell a story about a team and then compare stories and see which one you like better.
Love it. Beautifully said, Rocco. Let's get into the show. Good starting point here. We're going to start off with the 1 seeds. Haven't changed in a bit. We're going to just flash up the consensus 1 seeds from the wonderful Fielding the 68 bracketeers here. Alabama, Houston, Kansas, and Purdue remain on the 1 line. This is pretty universal at this point, I think, from everyone that tries their hand at bracketology, but I would say, in my opinion, it might be getting a little bit close with the bottom of the one and a team like UCLA coming up from the 2 seed line. Lukas, your thoughts on the 1 seeds? Did you have it in a different order than the consensus graphic just flashed up on the screen? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I have the same 4, not quite in the same order. I finally made the decision to leave Kansas over Houston. I had a really difficult time with that. I think they're one of the toughest teams actually to figure out where they belong. I mean, obviously Kansas is a lock for the 1 seed right now, but whether they belong as the number 1 overall seed or the 3rd overall seed is really tricky. After I feel like they didn't really get a ton of respect at the bracket preview. They were behind Houston then. But now they're up to 15 quad 1 wins. Nobody else in the country has more than 11. Yeah. I think that's a game that I think Kansas, if they beat Texas tomorrow, is going to be my number 2 overall team. If they lose to Texas, Houston probably goes back above. But for now, I have Alabama, Kansas, Houston, Purdue as that order. And as you said, UCLA is my main contender to potentially knock off Purdue if so happens.
Is it overall losses for you for Kansas that's kind of holding you back from putting them over in Alabama? Obviously, the Q1 wins they stick out, but
go ahead. No, what holds me back for Kansas is just where they were placed at the bracket preview. I feel like it takes a lot to jump over. Alabama hasn't done anything to warrant falling off from the number 1 overall spot. So I think that's what keeps Alabama just slightly ahead, even though I probably, without the bracket preview, if that didn't exist, I probably would have Kansas as my number 1 overall seed.
Rocco, to you, I mentioned maybe UCLA now in the conversation, at least for a 1. Do you think they can get there? Obviously, would probably involve winning out here, but is Purdue really that close to falling off? Or do you think it's kind of more of a narrative out there that isn't really true?
Well, I think the comparison's getting a little closer as time goes on. It's the hard thing is UCLA's obviously lost fewer games and they've ran away with their conference, but they don't play with the amount of challenges that Purdue plays with. I think, UCLA ending with Arizona at home, if they can get an emphatic win, they'll give the committee a lot to talk about to finish the season. And certainly if Purdue falls at home to Illinois to finish, I think for me, that'd be enough to put UCLA above them pretty clearly. If it ends up they both win, I don't know if that's enough to warrant a change because Purdue's taking care of their business too. So I think that's probably what it comes down to as we head into next week. I think when it comes to the conference tournament, I don't know if much is going to shift from there because both of them would have a bye until Thursday. The committee meetings will start like Wednesday morning. And, I don't think either of them will lose their first game. I would love to see my Washington Huskies knock off UCLA in the quarterfinals. It's not going to happen, Kai. So, so both those teams are probably going to win that first game. And if Purdue loses, they're going to play a much tougher team than like a Washington that UCLA will play.
Would you agree that UCLA is the closest to kind of taking over a 1 seed?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because their resume is super clean. Maryland's an unbelievable home team. They're the only team to win in that building, and they did it by a lot. And so they kind of, it's like being the mystery man. You can't really prove they're not that good. You can't really prove they belong bad. So the less you know about them, it kind of helps them more, right? So all they have to do is just keep winning, and then they'll put a stamp on all that with a win over Arizona if they can do that.
I think UCLA can make a run in the NCAA tournament. And if you think I'm wrong, you can prove it to me this season. We're partnering with Run Your Pool, who will be hosting the official Field of 68 bracket contest. Rob Douster, the head of Field of 68, has actually worked with Run Your Pool before, which is why he and we are so excited to land this sponsor. They have more than 50 game types for every sport you can think of: traditional bracket pool, survivor games, head-to-head games, pick X games, and of course, squares. The scoring is customizable. You can tailor your bracket rules to your pool. It's fantastic. Here's the best part, though. Run Your Pool is giving away $1,500 in cash prizes for free. Just sign up at the link in the description, play.runyourpool.com/field68. That's FIELD 68. Fill out a bracket and be eligible to win. Hope to see you guys on March 12th. The real ones already know what date that is. That was an ad. Get back to the show. All right, bubble talk, folks. Let's get into it. Some real intrigue here on the bubble. We talked about this past week. I want to start off with last 4 in, and we're going to go Lukas. Give us your last 4 in, give us your spiel, and let's break it down.
So my last 4 in right now are Auburn, NC State, Arizona State and Utah State as my last team in. For Auburn, it feels like we've talked about Auburn a lot on the show this year, but this is the first time we've really talked about them like squarely on the bubble. They lost 8 of 11. Aside from like a really big 33-point blowout of Missouri, their only other wins since January 21st are over Georgia and Mississippi. They've beaten just one KenPom top 100 team since mid-January. If the committee prioritizes recency, which it kind of did at the bracket preview, that's bad news for Auburn. The metrics are still strong, and they get Tennessee at home, but they're 2-9 in quad one. They've fallen pretty close for me. NC State's regular season's over. I think they're the only team in the SEC that's finished their regular season schedule already. Yeah. I'm not sure that's good or bad for NC State. They lost their last 2 games to Clemson and Duke. They entered the NCAA ACC tournament pretty much right on the cut line. I think they need at least 1 or 2. They could easily draw Boston College or Louisville in their first game, which doesn't really help them at all, which is where I think they were probably going to need 2 games. Like Auburn, they're not very good in quad one. They're 2-6. Clean resume with no bad losses, but they have a non-conference strength of schedule of 241st in the country that holds them back. Arizona State got in the field by thanks to a over half-court jump shot against Arizona, and then obviously a loss to UCLA hurts them. But another big game coming up at USC. We talked a few weeks ago how Arizona State had maybe the biggest ability to shift things over the last 2 weeks of any bubble team. They're 1-1 so far. Getting to 2-1 would get them pretty solidly in the field going into the Pac-12 tournament for me. Their resume isn't that dissimilar from a team like Wisconsin on quick glance. They both have high quantity of quad 1 and 2 wins, go with below average metrics. But as Rocco mentioned earlier, in terms of top end wins, top end road wins in particular, if you're comparing Arizona State and Wisconsin, Arizona State's at Arizona win is better than winning at Marquette. So that gets the edge there. And Utah State is one of the more interesting bubble teams. Something kind of has to give when it comes to Utah State. Nobody's made the field in the net era with a quad 1 win as an at large. Also, nobody's missed the field with a net better than 33, and Utah State's 22nd. The net's not the end all be all by far. It's not even close to that. But I want to ask, is the NCAA selection committee really going to say no to a team that ranks top 25 in its own metric? I think that's a question worth asking, and but it's probably only worth asking if they don't beat Boise State tomorrow night. I think if Utah State beats Boise State at home for a quad 1, they should get in the field. Their metrics are outstanding. They're 8-5 in quad 1 and 2 additionally. And Rocco, you're better at this than I am, but am I correct in thinking on the official team sheet, games are listed as away, home, and neutral games show the actual location?
It'll just say neutral. And
okay.
Yep.
Because worth noting for Utah State is they have a win over San Francisco at the Chase Center, which is 4 miles from San Francisco. That's a quad 3 neutral site game. It's a quad 2 road game.
It's a wonderful facility, by the way, Lucas.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll get Rocco's last 4 in here, but man, Utah State. There is a question in the chat. Yes, Brady. Utah State has 2 Q4 losses, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
2 Q4 losses, 0 Q1 wins, and yet they're top 25 net. They're 26th in KenPom. I mean, shoot, it's a real interesting case study, and we're going to learn a lot based on what the committee does with them. We'll see how the end of the season plays out here. But before that, let's get to Rocco's last 4 in here and discuss.
Yeah, just a note on Utah State real quick. The neutral loss to SMU just squeezed into quad 3 today. Not that I want to harp on that, but it's a committee. I want to remind the audience, it's a committee of 12 people interpreting this information in different ways. That might matter to like maybe 4 of the 12 people. And then you don't know who the alphas in the room are, because that's usually how it goes. Like, who's going to bully who to agree on Utah State or disagree on Utah State? I mean, that's what we're guessing.
I'll bring a binder for the Aggies.
There you go.
Bracket politics, man.
Yeah. So this is the reality. Yeah. I mean, there's certain things you can do all day, but you get a team like Utah State, it's really going to come down to maybe something like that. But my last 4 in today, I'll digress, is same as Monday. So I'm got NC State 4th above the cut line. For NC State, for me, just really not significant road damage. Their best road wins are at Wake and at VTech. Pretty good ACC level wins, but not tournament teams. They did not beat a tournament team on the road. So that's a little bit of a hole for the Wolfpack. They also have a subpar record in the top half of the quadrant system, which is kind of a little bit of a warning sign at 7 and 8. Lukas did a great job calling out that 240th ranked non-conference strength of schedule. They really did go all out with the 10 quad 4 contests that they played, which really don't matter. So, so that kind of puts themselves in jeopardy. There's like this little bubble that forms for teams like this. We saw it in 2019 with the TCU Horned Frogs, a team that 99% of the bracket matrix had in, and the committee left out. I'm seeing a lot of similarities with this NC State profile, albeit totally different because that's a Big 12 team. Just the similar things are missing here with NC State. But in for now, we'll play it safe. Nevada, I dropped down to this level. They had been pretty safely in until that almost double digit loss to Wyoming. For Nevada, they still just have the 2 wins against the field, and they're both at home. So although they do have that San Diego State win, it's there's a lot of mixed results now, and I think there would be some heavy debate on the Wolfpack in the room. So they're going to Dayton for me, and then I've got Arizona State for a lot of the same reasons as Lukas. Really, really hard to find anybody with a win like that on the road. That shot changed so many things for possibly Arizona State and Bobby Hurley. We'll see how that plays out, but a massive game with USC coming on Saturday tomorrow. So pay attention to that. And then the last team, I'm sticking with North Carolina. I'm not trying to defend it. I'm just trying to guess what the committee is going to do. Yeah. And the thing about Carolina is they've got really not that much bad at all. They've only lost at home twice. The one was by 1 against Pitt, against Miami by 8. Besides that, they're perfect at home. They don't have any bad losses really at all. And they're obviously not taking advantage of any of their opportunities on the road. Their best road win is still Syracuse. So that's a problem. But if you look at Duke, like Duke's best road win is Syracuse. So it's really interesting how that played out. But I think Carolina gets that Duke win tomorrow at home. Should be enough to feel a tiny bit safer. But they're right in that range right now where bid stealers and things like that could easily kick them out.
And while you won't hear Nevada in my last 4 in or my first 4 out, I'm with Rocco there. Nevada's my 6th to last team in.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So you're not too far off in that one. Yeah. UNC, man. Interesting. I don't see the committee leaving them out if they beat Duke. Is Duke a Q1 right now? Q1 win for them? Are they top 30?
They're 23 or something.
Duke's 23rd.
Yeah.
2 Q1 wins, no bad losses. Your name's Carolina. It sounds like a Dayton team to me, especially.
Well, two quad 1 wins might be a stretch. Virginia's 30th.
Virginia's fallen. Okay.
Virginia's 30th in the net. That they're one spot. They don't even have to play to fall out of quad 1. They could just drop by virtue of other results. They're the last team that counts as a home quad 1 game right now. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, from a pure eyeballs perspective, I think the committee and the NCAA wants Carolina and Dayton. We'll see what they actually do. Let's flash up the consensus fielding the 68 last 4 in here. Names we've heard before: Auburn, NC State, looks familiar.
Arizona State, Utah State. I believe this was Lukas's last 4 in. Yeah, man, Auburn. They've fallen down quick on the S curve here. Hard to believe my Missouri Tigers are much safer than the Auburn Tigers right now. Funny how bracketology works. All right, let's go first 4 out and discuss. Rocco, going to you first. What do you got?
Yeah, so Utah State covered very well by Lukas. They're a tough team to decide with. I went with Carolina just more with the clean resume, no bad losses. Obviously, Utah State has 2. Home loss to Weber State, neutral loss to SMU in the Diamond Head Classic. But I think overall they've played like 13 quad 3 games and gone 13-0. So they just have a bizarre set of results that are really tough to compare with the rest of the bubble unless it's another Mountain West team. But they're right there. I mean, they're right there. And if they were taken, I couldn't really fight it. Oklahoma State, very clear. They've got to win this weekend at Texas Tech, their last game. They're sitting there at 11-14 against the top 3 quads, which tells you they have 14 losses. You can't take 16 and get in. You can take up to 15. It's only happened a couple times. But with Oklahoma State, some of their wins, they would be considered in that spot, but they're not going to get there unless they win either the Big 12 tournament or this weekend. So they'll be TKO'd out of the at-large pool tomorrow if they lose. So take that with a grain of salt. Penn State is my 3rd team out, and this is an interesting one. Obviously, a really nice win at Northwestern to get them a lot more interesting here this week. Probably should have talked about them at the start, but they also get to finish against one of the worst road teams I've seen in a long time. That's an at-large team, and that's Maryland. And so really good opportunity to close strong for the Nittany Lions. I do have concerns about their 281st ranked non-conference strength of schedule. That's historically not a good position to be in. They also have losses twice to Wisconsin, who's another bubble team. They've lost to Michigan, Nebraska, Clemson, and Virginia Tech. So although they've beaten 5 teams in the field, they've lost to 6 outside of the field. So some of that stuff for me is just not fully balancing for Penn State. Now, if Penn State had beat a team that's, a protected seed, like on the top 4 seed lines, it'd be a lot easier. But right now they've just got a nice mix of teams seeded anywhere from like 5 to 11. So it's just tough. So I think they're just still a little bit on the outside, but getting a lot more interesting. And then lastly, Charleston, we've covered them.
Cougs.
The Cougs. CAA tournament started today. They'll be taking the court in a couple days. I think they got a double bye. I think the only way they fully get considered is a nice run to the championship and a narrow loss to probably Hofstra. Perhaps a narrow loss to Towson would be interesting too. But a narrow loss to Hofstra would be very interesting just because right now the strength of resume metric, which is on the team sheet, one of the only things you can really look at that is any kind of common denominator with big schools, has them 44th. And if you look at the big board right now, the top 46 are in. So if you look at Charleston as the 44th best, again, it's just, this is a group decision, Kai. So if you get half the room agreeing Charleston belongs, they're going to find a way in. So you can't count them out.
I mean, Rocco, if they get 30 wins, how are you going to tell me a 30-win team doesn't make it? If I'm in the committee room, I'm saying 30 wins. No one's ever had 30 wins and not made the NCAA tournament. I just think it'd be nuts to leave them out if that happened.
Right. And if Oral Roberts loses in the championship game or anywhere in that tournament,
them too.
I mean, gosh, both of them have very strong. So though if you're sitting there watching all these smaller conference tournaments this week, those are the teams to watch really closely.
I will say, if I'm doing math,
Lukas,
I'm doing math correctly, I think Charleston will end with 29 D1 wins because they played North Greenville. Which is a non-D1 game in early December.
29 is pretty good.
I agree. Is 29-4 really going to miss the tournament? I'm totally on board with the argument.
Definitely. Yes, correct. And Henry points out in the chat as well. Yes, 29 D1 wins, which is what shows up on the actual team sheet. All right, Lukas, let's get your first 4 out here.
Yeah, so I have 3 of the same teams that we've already discussed, but my first team out is Wisconsin, followed by North Carolina, Penn State, and Oklahoma State. I dropped Wisconsin out of my field in favor of Utah State after the loss to Purdue last night. Really, the Badgers are just simply piling up too many losses. They've lost 11 of their last 16. And as I mentioned with Auburn, if the committee weights recent results, like they kind of indicated at the bracket preview, 11 losses in 16 games doesn't really sit right. They do have 6 quad 1 wins, but they have the worst metrics of any team in consideration. They're below 500 against the upper 3 quadrants. They're 11-13 in those games. I think they could be in the field today. They also could not be in the field today. I don't think they have a particularly friendly path to move up either. They go to Minnesota on Sunday, which a win doesn't help very much, and a loss is disastrous, which we've already talked about in the Big Ten as of last night. And I think even if they beat Minnesota, if Penn State beats Maryland, which Rocco indicated earlier, Maryland's been pretty horrible on the road. If Penn State wins that game, Wisconsin's going to get the 11th seed in the Big Ten tournament, which means they will have to face Minnesota again. And if they face Minnesota again, that's a game where a win doesn't help you very much, and a loss is pretty disastrous. It feels weird, but Wisconsin's bubble might rest on needing to go 3-0 against Minnesota. They beat them by 3 at home in the first matchup. North Carolina is my second team out. Rocco had them in. I'm not opposed to that. I think that they're a team that really just needs the Duke win. I think if they beat Duke and if Virginia can stay with a solid finish, I think they'll get in the field. It's a tough game though. Right now they're trending towards being 1-9 or 0-10 potentially in quad 1. It's really a difficult juggle for them because Virginia barely qualifies as quad 1. And if Virginia falls out and they lose to Duke, they'll be out for sure. The metrics are good. But winning at Duke is an absolute must. Penn State, right on the same page with Rocco there. They've won 4 or 5. They won at Northwestern. That's a big one. They get Maryland at home. We talked about it. Maryland's 2-8 on the road. Their only road wins are Louisville and Minnesota. Penn State's 12-3 at home this year. They can make a jump there. Oklahoma State, Rocco hit it right on the head. They lose to Texas Tech. They're going to have 16 losses unless they win the automatic bid in the Big 12 tournament. That's not going to get it done. They have to win. And if they do, if they lose, then jumping into that next first four out kind of seems like a Michigan, Clemson, Villanova type team.
Rocco, did you have Wisconsin on the outside of your first four out?
Yeah, they're fifth out for me. I put Charleston a little bit above them just because in a real life selection situation today, I would take Charleston above them. But I do think
losses.
But just a counterpoint a little bit to Lukas, even though they might play Minnesota twice in a row, for the way I view the data, because right now they're 11 and 13, 2 games under when you take away quad 4, that would actually, those two little like whatever wins against Minnesota actually gets them back to 500. And I start to get a little more comfortable putting them in. So
but then they'd have to lose again.
They do have to lose again. Right. So if they can get the extra win on the way to that, maybe they can get to 14 and 14 at some point. Yeah. That would be, I guess, the next round of the Big Ten. So yeah.
Again, like we say every time, conference shouldn't matter. Doesn't matter for committee. Wisconsin finishes 11th in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna get some people saying that in the room.
They can still finish 12th.
Well,
I lost to Minnesota. They can because they would have if Wisconsin loses to Minnesota, they lose the tiebreaker because they went 0-1 to Nebraska.
Yeah, I think we all assume they lose to Minnesota, they're done.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
Hey Kai, I've got one other thing I'll throw out there about North Carolina real quick. Mm-hmm. So Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director, is on the committee, and
there you go.
Is he
an alpha?
But I want the audience to understand he could be, but it wouldn't matter theoretically if he is. But you could do your own psychology on it. The rules are, if your team is discussed, you have to leave the room. So any Carolina conversation, Bubba leaves. But I've served on these mock committees, right? And how it works is you all become buddies like throughout the process. You're going to lunch together, you're going to dinner together.
Drinks,
so it's like when Bubba leaves the room, do you want to screw Bubba? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So there's some fun psychology right there for if Carolina's still in this position next week.
Yeah, especially if Bubba leaves a couple hundreds on the table and just gives a wink and says, "I'm just going to leave these here. If they're gone when I come back, hey, no big deal." That's Bubba for you. I don't know Bubba personally, so I'm speculating. All right, let's get the consensus fielding the 68 first four out up on the screen. See if we got any differences here. We don't. Wisconsin,
really familiar.
Wisconsin, UNC, Penn State, and Oklahoma State. Man, I'll tell you what. I feel bad for Mike Boynton at Oklahoma State. I really was rooting for him, and I liked where Oklahoma State was about a week and a half ago. But boy, right now it's not looking good for the Cowboys. You guys did a pretty good job breaking them down already. Let's shift gears to some more specific team hitters. I got a couple of things in the chat also I want to discuss. Let's start with the Mountain West and specifically Boise State. So they go from last four in on Monday. They're now sitting at a 9 seed in the fielding the 68 bracket. Was it just the win at San Diego State, Rocco? That's question one. Number two question is these Mountain West teams, Nevada, Utah State, Boise State, pretty much all of their good wins are against each other. How does that work when you're comparing to these power schools that are like, hey, we're Michigan. We beat some pretty good competition, and you're just giving the Mountain West rewards and rating them highly in KenPom, for instance, and predictive metrics, and they're just beating each other. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, good question. So the first question, I'll just say this, partly Boise State's own good by beating San Diego State, really important win for them, as I said, but also we had teams like Auburn, Rutgers, even USC, and Pittsburgh, all lost. So Boise, for me, was able to jump above all those teams this week. So you have to keep in mind it's a big picture thing. So just everything went the Broncos' way from that standpoint. In terms of the Mountain West comparisons, I think there are some subtle differences. First, Nevada and Boise State have both beaten San Diego State. Utah State did not do that. Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side, when you're comparing Nevada and Boise, and I did this before the San Diego State game, so this would have been in my Monday bracket post or Tuesday. You look a little bit deeper in the resume. It's about at bats, and this will go into your larger question about how you compare them to a Michigan or a larger school. They get way more at bats. So at a certain point, you're kind of looking at what's your percentage in those opportunities. So Boise State, I think now they've played 13 games in the top 1.5 quadrants if you go through 2A. And they're 9-4. It's like a super strong record against most of these teams around them. Mm-hmm. You look at Michigan or, Wisconsin, Penn State, any of those types of teams. Most of them are either 500 if they're lucky or under. So they start to win some of those types of comparisons. Obviously, they're not going to have those big, shiny, sexy wins that a lot of the Big 10 or Big 12 teams have. But at some point, you have to strike a balance with it all. And that's why I like looking at the teams that they played and how they did and what's their story and comparing the story, because you can get really lost in the madness of it all and the numbers if you're not able to kind of put that all together at the end.
And as Rocco gets to Boise State and Nevada, I'll pull out of the bookshelf and dust off the cover of my Utah State story. In terms of just looking at quadrants versus looking at the teams they play and where they play them and that sort of approach, Utah State doesn't have those shiny wins. It didn't beat San Diego State. But what it does have is something that I wonder what the committee will do with, and that's how extensive do you look at wins over the field? Is it just wins over projected at large teams? How deep do you want to go into the auto bids? Utah State beat Utah Valley. They're the WAC leader coming into their tournament. They beat Bradley, who's a leader in their league, and they beat Oral Roberts, who swept the entire Summit League. Those are three really, really good mid-major wins that I think have potential to carry more weight the deeper you look into their resume.
Yeah, definitely. Right. People forget about those other teams being pretty good as well. Just because they don't have the big name doesn't mean they aren't good teams and worthy of the quadrants they're placed in. Rutgers, guys, let's talk Rutgers. We know about the bad loss, Minnesota. Is it possible they end up missing the tournament, Lukas, entirely?
Yeah.
Is there a path?
I mean, I felt really safe with Rutgers when they were 16-7. It's lost 5 of 7 now, including the buzzer beating loss at Minnesota. When you look at it as a whole, when we talk about the Big Ten, there's really only one bad loss in the Big Ten, and that's Minnesota. And they took that loss. You combine losing to Minnesota with losing to Seton Hall, Nebraska, both at home, a neutral site loss to Temple. I mean, Rocco mentioned earlier, they have 4 losses in quad 3. They're 2-4 in quad 3. And I think that's kind of back to the point with teams. I keep coming back to them, but with North Carolina and Utah State, North Carolina's 7-0 in quad 3, Utah State's 13-0. And I think we underappreciate how hard it is to win in quad 3. Especially this year, when you look at its team, Rutgers is 2-4 in quad 3. Every single team ranked from 30 to 40 in the net, except one has a quad 3 loss. There's teams everywhere that have quad 3 losses, quad 4 losses. Texas A&M has 2 quad 4 losses too. There's a ton of teams with those kind of losses this season where I think we underappreciate the value of scheduling quad 3 games over quad 4 games and winning those games.
Yeah, well said.
I mostly agree there. And just one other point on Rutgers, I hinted at it earlier. Since the Meg injury, they're 2-5, and the 2 wins were pretty good. They won at Penn State and at Wisconsin, but they took the home loss by 10 to Nebraska, and then they of course lost at Minnesota. I feel like those losses outweigh the good wins in a little bit of a way, because those are pretty tough losses in that league. And then they lost to Indiana, Michigan, and Illinois. Michigan was also a home loss by 13. And so this is the stuff that I think the committee will double click on when you're looking at a team with an injury issue, especially this particular committee, because some of the clues we were able to take from the bracket preview was they cared about Creighton's injury issue. They cared about TCU's injury issue. They're going to care about these bubble injury issues. And for Rutgers, it's actually working a lot against them, because the sample size they're giving without Mag is a completely different team.
Yeah.
I'll close with.
Go ahead, Lukas.
I'll close with one negative and one positive on Rutgers. Negatively, as Rocco mentioned, the Michigan loss. Not only did they lose to Michigan, they lost to Michigan at home. And if Michigan's going to be a team that's sitting on the bubble, which would mean they would beat at Indiana tomorrow, head to head, if they're directly next to each other in the last conversation, that's the only match that Rutgers and Michigan have played to this point, unless they meet in the Big Ten tournament. Positively, though, win at home against Northwestern, they're probably in okay shape again.
Yeah, if you're going to credit teams who had guys out with injury, you got to do the opposite, right? I mean, and that's
you're looking at the team that's coming to the tournament. What do you bring into the dance? So
what do you bring to the dance? I love it.
Exactly.
Media basketball, and I'm on the other side while everyone else dances. I'm that kid in the corner.
Just a media pass and just waving to the fans. Florida Atlantic, guys. Everyone kind of a question on their mind here. They're awesome, by the way. If you never watched FAU play this season, they're fantastic. Rocco, are the Owls safe even without the auto bid? What do you think about large capabilities?
Yeah, anytime you get a question like that in my seat, you have to look at the worst case scenario. So the Owls, I have tons of love for them. I've tried to express that on publicly on Twitter, but in general, with their resume, they've had a heck of a run. They actually went up they blew out Rice last night. They went up to top 15 in net, which matters a little bit for a team like this. That's hard to compare with big schools. But they'll end at La Tech, which is a probably borderline quad 3 loss. If they lost that game, they actually went to overtime against La Tech at home. So it could be a tricky matchup, but the Owls seem to be humming again. They won by a combined 66 points last week in their 2 home games. And then you look at the Conference USA bracket, they're actually going to play probably the winner of La Tech or FIU, which is a little tricky too, because the La Tech took them to OT. Both those teams took them to OT. FIU took them to OT one game as well. So if they lost both of those, you're probably in a little bit of a sketchy waters. I would hope they wouldn't lose by that much, so all their power numbers get screwed up. But they're almost all the way a lock. I think if they just win one of these two, they're fine.
Yep.
Yeah, those resume metrics. What, 28th right now, Lukas, in resume?
27.5. Yep.
Pretty darn good.
Yeah, they're 1 win away from a lock for me. Just beat Louisiana Tech on the road, and they'll dance. Win their first game in the CUSA, and they'll dance. They're playing really well since they lost to Mississippi to Middle Tennessee. Rocco hit it. Wins of 40, 26, and 29 since then.
Yeah, not bad.
The thing I will say in relation to Florida Atlantic is I think they put themselves so close to a lock, and a Louisiana Tech win would do that. That I love Florida Atlantic. I think they're by far the best team in the CUSA, but darn if this league is not ripe for a bid stealer. North Texas is a really good team. Florida Atlantic swept them in the regular season. I can't wait to watch a CUS tournament and hear the first. It's hard to beat a team 3 times when you talk Florida Atlantic, North Texas.
It's gonna be an awesome tournament. Hey, UAB's still there too, Mr. Jelly Walker.
Yes, yeah.
Don't count him out.
There. Certainly not. But UAB, I think UAB beat Florida Atlantic already. So I can't beat a team. So I can't say beat a team 3 times. Then I have to stick with North Texas for the narrative.
And Middle Tennessee should be the 4 seed, so that'd be a tough semifinal. Yeah. Middle Tennessee beat them up pretty good last time in Murfreesboro. So
it's a good team too, well coached as well.
I like that team.
Yeah. Lukas, Providence. People might be surprised. I know I was a little bit at where Providence is currently projected to be seated in the tournament right now. I believe a 9 seed is kind of the consensus.
Yeah.
Why are the Friars so low right now? They're ranked. On the AP poll, I think they're top 20. But even in KenPom, they're pretty high right now, especially for Providence. We're not used to seeing them in the top 30-ish. Why are they seeded so low right now?
Yeah, they're a 9 seed for me too, but I think they're one of those teams that has space between them and the 10s. I'm not super concerned about them falling significantly lower. I think they're probably going to be in an 8-9 game. As you mentioned, unlike last year, Providence's quality metrics are pretty good. 32nd in BPI, 31st in KenPom, 28th in Sagarin. They have 3 quad 1A wins, and that's awesome, but those are their only quad 1 wins. That's not quite the quantity of other teams sitting in the area. If you compare them to a team like Iowa, who has 13 quad 1 and 2 wins, or Iowa State, who has 8 quad 1 wins, those teams are sitting a little bit higher in the 6 to 8 seed range for me. But yeah, I think overall Providence is in pretty safe position to dance, and they'll be probably in that 8-9 game type thing for me. If you want to go metric wise, Providence hated on KenPom all last year. How about you just add an I at the end of KP and you've got your resume to hate this year? They're top 40 in every metric except KPI, where they're 58th.
Yeah. KenPom's doing them favors this year. Got them 31st, man. That's not Ed Cooley's zone, man. Ed Cooley hangs out in the 40 to 60 range and gets the same exact seed they're pretty much slated for this year. 6 to 9 is usually where they hang out. Let's shift gears here, because Rocco, you have a specific question in the chat just for you. Okay. What is your favorite low to mid major tournament, and which team from that tournament should we watch out for seeding matchup purposes in the dance?
You can't beat Arch Madness, and it's going on as we speak. So it's I'm
great
doing
answer
duty here. To me, there's 32 conference tournaments, and I love all 32, and I try to represent as many of those as I can. But there's 2 that are just absolutely on their own level. One is the Big East tournament in the Garden, and 2 is Arch Madness in St. Louis. Both are bucket list items for me. I was supposed to actually be at the Big East the year of COVID, and I canceled the flight last second. Thank goodness. But I'll get to both of those one year. And I do think out of the Valley, Bradley's obviously playing very well, won the league, will be a very tough out in the tournament. Drake has beaten Mississippi State. Drake has a lot of great wins. They have a ton of experience. They have two starters that were in the 2020 championship game that are still there. So it's like those two teams will be probably your toughest out, but I'll mention Indiana State if they can survive this. They're built kind of like a poor man's Florida Atlantic, because they can go 9 deep. They have all these different matchup options. Every single game of an event like Arch Madness, they can throw different lineup combos at you. They like to mix their starting lineups. Voss is a fun player. Henry attacks the basket with tenacity. So I mean, it's the Sycamores, aka the Trees. A lot of fun to watch. It'd be cool to see a game against Bradley tomorrow. We'll see if we get that.
Also, Cooper Neese is 9 for 11 from 3 today, so that's
not bad. That's pretty good.
They've got a great mix of guys if they can get humming.
Well coached too, like Josh Schertz over there.
Yep.
Lukas, for you, if Arizona beats UCLA at Pauley Pavilion, who ends up being higher on the 2 seed line? Who gets the 2 seed in the West?
Yeah, I think I'd probably end up going with Arizona there.
The sweep,
just because. Yeah, I think the sweep, and that'll put UCLA down to 2-3 in Quad 1A games, and it'd bring Arizona to 5-0. I think that's going to be hard to argue with.
Almost 6-0, right? I think they lost one, right, recently.
Yes, I think one dropped from Quad 1A down to Quad 1.
Yeah, real close.
But I think that would probably give the edge there. But I wouldn't see necessarily a huge argument if you put UCLA higher. They're probably still going to have better quality metrics. And they will have the cleanest resume up top. All 4 of their losses are in Quad 1. That would be all 5 losses after a loss to Arizona, if that was the case. Whereas Arizona's got 3 of its 5 losses in Quad 2.
Rocco, to you. We talked Villanova a little bit, but what do they have to do to get that large, or is it impossible?
Cut down the nets in the Garden.
There you go.
Get to Saturday. Get to Saturday. I'm on board. I think they can lose in the tail game and still get in.
Yeah.
I feel it.
I'll bounce back to Rocco here because that was a short question. But question about, this is related to injuries, or in this case, a guy kicked off the team. Iowa State. They have not been playing very well. Caleb Grill just got kicked off the team.
Yeah.
How far do they drop? Can they drop to Dayton? Get that far? The record is kind of getting close. No, Dayton.
I don't think so.
Bridge too far.
I think the bridge is too far. I think I tweeted out something. If the season was 2 weeks longer, they might be able to fall out of the field because they could lose themselves. I mean, it's a team that hasn't won since the bracket preview, but at the time, the committee believed they were the 11th best team, which is probably a little higher than I think most of us had them. But no matter how you slice it, they were at least a 3 or a 4 range. And I think the most extreme we've ever seen was your Mizzou Tigers. They were that year. They were, I think it was 3 years ago. They were the 16th last team on the bracket reveal. They ended up a 9 seed.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, so maybe that's the extreme we'll see here at the worst for Iowa State. I think the hard thing for the committee is a couple things. One is little limited sample size. They'll get to see Iowa State once without Grill this weekend, and then maybe twice if they bounce out early in the Big 12. That'll only be 2 pieces of data. And then the other part is, if you look at the board, you'll have to imagine this in your head and look at our bracket later. But from the 6 seeds down through the 11s, there's a lot of mush in there. And so Iowa State keeps hanging on because a lot of the teams in that range keep losing, or they just don't have all the groundwork that Iowa State created. Yeah. So, Cyclones are kind of lucking out in some ways here.
Yeah.
And 8 Quad 1 wins still.
Yeah, still pretty darn good. The other day I looked at it and I was like, sheesh, I guess they're still pretty high up here on the S curve. I mean, you can't really argue with 8 Q1 wins. Pretty good. Lukas, which team is most likely to be underseeded? I can tell you from a betting perspective, but let's get your bracketologist take.
Yeah. It's a tough question. I think I would like to go with Arkansas. I think with a healthy Nick Smith.
Yeah,
I think
that's a good answer.
I think they're probably going to sit, for me, they're on the 8 seed line right now. I think that they're probably a better team than that overall. I mean, they're top 16 in all 3 quality metrics. If you want to believe the computers, that would put them as a top 4 seed. That would be like double their seed that they're currently at right now.
Yep. So
I would probably go with Arkansas as that team. With that said, I think that if there's a couple teams on the outside of the field that get in, for instance, if, as Rocco mentioned, if Villanova runs through the Big East tournament, they're probably going to get an 11 or a 12, and that's a really, really, really good team. If you don't want to see if they continue to be as hot as they have been, they'd probably be in that mix too. But I think I'd go with Arkansas because I think Creighton is going to get the attention they deserve seed wise after how much they respected them at the bracket preview with Kalkbrenner's injury.
Do you want to add a team there, Rocco? Think be underseeded?
I was just going to throw Utah Valley out there. The Wolverines are. I've had them as a 12 all year. I think they belong there, but I could see the committee maybe throwing them as a 13. And either way, they're not going to be in the top 11 because they play in the WAC and there's some disadvantages there. But they're a 23 win team. If they win tonight, they'll be at 24 wins. If they win the WAC, which they'll need to do, they'll be at 27 wins. And they're dangerous. They've won at Oregon. They've won at BYU by 15. So, I mean, they're a team with moxie. And Trey Woodbury hits all sorts of clutch shots. Justin Harmon's terrific. So again, I don't know how you want to look at this, and you can't really seed them much higher than 12, but I think Utah Valley is pretty dangerous if they get in.
You talk about throw me Colgate.
Colgate. Yeah.
I think they could find themselves as a 15. They bring back a lot of pieces from last year that threatened Wisconsin. They're the best 3-point shooting team in the country. They're shooting 41% from deep this year. They don't turn it over. They shoot a ton of threes. They hit a ton of threes. They defensively rebound and they keep you off the line. I think those give you a lot of if they get the right 3 or 2 seed, they're an interesting group.
Yeah, definitely. Colgate, I mean, we've seen the damage they've done recently in tournaments. They almost beat Arkansas. That was their most recent one, right?
They can tell a power conference team to brush their teeth.
Yeah, there you go. The Colgate toothpaste brand.
I'll
not sponsored,
for that
not
one.
a sponsor of Field of 68 or Fielding the 68, but still a good toothpaste brand. Yeah, Utah Valley. You talk about a coaching job Mark Matson's done. You lose Fardaws Amack, 2-time WAC Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, whatever he was, and you get better the next season.
Better.
Go figure.
Yeah,
go figure. Texas Tech doing pretty well with him back in the lineup. Let's shift gears, guys, to finish the show here. Games to watch this weekend. Tennessee at Auburn. We talked about the Tigers. They have fallen down the S curve. A win here does wonders for their tournament hopes. A loss, well, they'll be holding their breath on Selection Sunday. Rocco, the biggest game probably is the Mountain West battle between Boise and Utah State. 2 bubble Mountain West squads, top 26 teams. Who you got? Spectrum Center, Utah State gets it done?
I think they should. Yeah, they're really good at home. Typically, they fell short in that San Diego State game, but that could have gone either way. I think they'll get it done. I'm just not sure. We'll see. Because again, you can only take 36 at-large teams. So if a couple bids get stolen, or if all these other teams above them keep winning, if it was a road game, I'd be like, yes, they're in. But just winning at home, they've done that before. They did it, and it's not San Diego State. So beating a team that's a 9 seed at home, you almost probably should do that. So I just don't know if it moves the needle enough. We'll have to see how it plays out. They'll probably go out and pound them too, because I mean, right now, so my issue with Utah State is their best road wins at UNLV, which they just got, and it's a UNLV team that's pretty much dead right now. And they pounded them by 25. That's why they're 22 in the net. They skyrocketed because they beat UNLV. That's not playing the same anymore. So, I think Utah State's biggest hole is on the road, and they can't do anything about that in this game.
True. Obviously, Duke UNC, hey, big game for college basketball purposes, but a big game for the Tar Heels. They win. You heard Lukas and Rocco probably give them the nod for the tournament, or at least going into the ACC tournament. Arizona State at USC, bubble. Lukas, we had a question actually in the chat that asked, can USC and Arizona State both get in the field? I think the answer is yes. Both.
Yeah, I think it would take Arizona State to win that game. I think Arizona State would have to win that game.
Mm-hmm.
I think USC's in better position. I actually think USC's in pretty okay spot. They're 10-7 off the.
You have them on the 10 line, right? USC.
Yes,
I do. They're my top 10.
Top 10. Yeah, they've improved recently. The metrics, I noticed they climbed a bit. I think they're in the fielding the 68 last 4 out or first 4 in, a couple weeks ago, but they've climbed up.
Yeah, they've played well.
And then, of course, guys, conference tournaments, man. You got to watch conference tournaments. Arch Madness, Rocco talked about it.
Man, I got 10 bubble games that you haven't listed yet.
Oh, well, list them off, man. Give us what we should watch.
Kansas State at West Virginia. West Virginia is going to get in a point where they can get a lot of losses. Winning that one, though, I think they're in pretty good shape. UConn at Villanova. Villanova's only chance to stay in an at-large conversation is if they win this game. If they lose, they'll be out, and they'll have to win an MSG. Oklahoma State at Texas Tech. Oklahoma State, ton of losses, must-win game. Got to beat Texas Tech. Pittsburgh at Miami, Florida. Pittsburgh has been really, really good on the road this year. Need that one to stay in pretty safe position. I have them as one of my 11 seeds right now, not in the last 4 in. Mississippi State at Vanderbilt, tough road game. Vanderbilt's played pretty well recently. Mississippi State looking to stay on the right side of the bubble. Houston at Memphis. Memphis can pretty much secure itself a bit if they win this game against Houston. If not, they're still in danger if they lose in their first game of the AC tournament. Maryland at Penn State. Penn State looking to play its way into the field. Tough, really nice home opportunity against a team that's played really poor on the road. Can put themselves not only close to the cut line, but also give themselves a better seed in the Big Ten tournament to potentially get another tough matchup instead of having to play Minnesota in the first round. Michigan at Indiana, only shot, I think, for Michigan to really be in the at-large conversation. I think they have to win this one after they didn't get the one in double OT at Illinois last night. Northwestern at Rutgers. Rutgers is trending down. Getting closer to the bubble. I think that's a game that can clinch their spot in the field. And Wisconsin at Minnesota, that's a play-out game for Wisconsin, in my opinion. They lose at Minnesota, they're done.
Love it. The rundown. What I heard, Lukas, in my head, what I just heard is there's a ton of good college basketball on the next week or so.
Yes.
Oh, man. Put it on your TV. Put it on all your TVs you got at your house. Just watch college basketball for the next month. It's going to be great. Guys, thanks for joining us on Fielding the 68. A reminder, as usual, the full bracket from our 4 experts. The consensus bracket will be tweeted after the show at the Field of 68 on Twitter. Thanks to Run Your Pool. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new show at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you then. Enjoy the games this weekend. Enjoy the